Approach to the patient with the diarrhea. So whenever a patient comes to us with a presentation of loose stools, predominantly we suspect two conditions. One is diarrhea, the other one is dysentery. Diarrhea means loose stools with increased frequency, whereas dysentery is a varied manifestation where there is inflammation of the colon, especially the large intestine, leading to uh, loose stools mixed with the mucus and blood. So that is dysentery, and the diarrhea is increased frequency and loose stools. So when we evaluate diarrhea, there are some important factors that we have to evaluate in the patient for. So let us discuss diarrhea. So first is, let us look at how the fluid absorption happens in our intestine normally. So normally what happens is around 10 liters of fluid enters the duodenum every day, of which 1.5 liters are absorbed in the small intestine and the rest is moved downwards, where except 100 ml all the other fluids are absorbed in the large intestine. So around 100 ml liquid or water is sent out with the stools. So whenever there is a pathology that plays with these mechanisms, this absorption can get affected and can lead to diarrhea. Another mechanism in which diarrhea can happen is because of the inflammation of the mucosal linings, leading to excessive secretion into the lumen, leading to diarrhea. So we'll see that through the discussion, we'll see how these pathologies manifest. So first, what is the definition of diarrhea? So when can you call a condition as diarrhea? So whenever there are three or more stool motions every day, with the stool weight which is more than 200 grams and which is loose in consistency, then we can call it as a diarrhea. We have to keep in mind that there are some people, especially with irritable bowel disease or normally itself, their bowel movements are more than 2 or 3. So in such patients, we have to ensure how much is the stool that is being passed and what is the consistency of the stool. So that is the definition of diarrhea. Next is, what are the points that we have to consider when we evaluate a patient with a diarrhea. So first thing that we have to identify is whether it is an acute diarrhea or a chronic one, whether it is an infective or non-infective one, whether it is secretory or an osmotic diarrhea, inflammatory or non-inflammatory, small bowel or large bowel. So there are some important features in the patient when available. We can make these differences. So first is acute versus chronic. So any diarrhea which is less than 3 weeks of onset can be considered as acute, whereas more than 4 weeks is considered as chronic. And there are causes of acute diarrhea that include infection like bacteria, virus, protozoa, a lot of pathogens, food poisoning, food allergies, medications, and sometimes it may be an initial manifestation of a chronic diarrhea. And in case of chronic diarrhea, again it can be divided into watery diarrhea, that is osmotic, as well as secretory. We will discuss in detail later on. So osmotic diarrhea is induced by osmotic laxatives, carbohydrate malabsorption. Secretory, usually there are so many congenital syndromes like diarrhea, then bacterial toxins, bile acid malabsorption, inflammatory bowel diseases like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, microscopic colitis, diverticulitis, vasculitis, drugs, poisons, all these factors can lead to chronic diarrhea. Again, laxative abuse, then disordered motility of the intestines, like in diabetic neuropathies, irritable bowel syndrome, endocrine causes like hyperthyroidism, Addison's disease, gastrinomas, etc. can cause diarrhea. And also there are some epidemiological considerations. So whenever we take the history, we have to take care of some of the important factors like history of recent travel, especially for bacterial and protozoal. Then epidemics, when the patient comes to you from a area where there is an epidemic going on, or diabetic patients, as in altered motility, then drugs, then HIV. There are so many other important factors that can lead to diarrhea. There are so many drugs that can induce diarrhea, includes antibiotics, anti-neoplastic agents, anti-inflammatory agents, antihypertensives, antacids, then colchicine, prostaglandin, theophylline. A lot of drugs can cause diarrhea. Heavy metal poisoning also can cause diarrhea. Let us look into differences between osmotic and secretory diarrhea. So osmotic diarrhea, usually what happens is, if there is a osmotically active component that is present inside the lumen, it can pull fluid into the lumen. So then the fluid will become, the feces will become fluid or loose, and the patient can develop diarrhea. For example, the lactulose that is given as a modern purgative can be considered as that is inducing an osmotic diarrhea, because it cannot be absorbed and it acts osmotically so that it pulls fluid into the lumen. So these diarrheas are called as osmotic diarrhea, whereas secretory diarrhea means usually it happens in case of inflammatory pathologies, where due to the inflammation of the lumen or luminal wall, there is increased secretion into the lumen, leading to diarrhea. So how to differentiate clinically is, fasting always improves osmotic diarrhea, because once the osmotically active component is put out of the body, the diarrhea stops. But this is not the case in case of secretory diarrhea, and the fasting will never stop or reduce the diarrhea. So that is why there is a main difference between osmotic and secretory diarrhea. Next is inflammatory versus with blood, pus, fever, abdominal pain, tenesmus, and presence of leukocytes in the stools. So obviously when it is present with pus and mucus, we call it as a dysentery. And in case of non-inflammatory, the stool is watery, without blood, pus, and fever or fecal leukocytes. So this is how we can differentiate between an inflammatory and non-inflammatory diarrhea. Next is the question whether the pathology lies in the small intestine or large intestine. So if you look into the diarrhea that is due to the pathology in the large intestine, there is frequent urges, mushy or dark colored stools. It's rarely foul smelling. The patient will have left lower quadrant pain, tenesmus, and usually the volume of the stool is comparatively less in comparison to small intestinal diarrhea. In case of small intestinal diarrhea, the stool will be watery, light colored, foul smelling. The pain will be periumbilical or right lower quadrant, and there is large volume of the stools. So this volume itself will give you a difference between whether the large intestine is involved or the small intestine is involved. So there is a difference between large intestine versus small intestine. So usually small volume means less than 400 ml. Usually happens in rectal and sigmoidal disease, as in ulcerative colitis or proctitis. Large volume usually osmotic in case of lactase deficiency, laxatives, sprue, etc. Secretory in case of cholera, enteroinvasive E. coli or enterotoxigenic E. coli, laxatives, then dysmotility, motility disorders, and altered permeability as in sprue. There are some non-infectious causes of diarrhea, include abnormal mucosa as in inflammatory bowel disease, celiac disease, microscopic colitis, eosinophilic and allergic gastroenteritis, and radiation enteritis. And normal mucosa, when there is a non-infectious cause and the mucosa is normal, osmotic diarrhea, malabsorption, and a rapid intestinal transit as in case of irritable bowel syndrome. Infectious diarrhea, usually they are spread through the fecal-oral route, usually bacterial, viral, or parasitic causes. Bacterial, again, there are so many types of bacteria that can lead to diarrhea, like E. coli, Shigella. A lot of pathogens can cause bacterial diarrhea. So enterotoxigenic in case of Vibrio cholerae, enterotoxigenic E. coli. Then there are foodborne toxins, as in Bacillus cereus, Clostridium species. So again, the periodicity is again very important. If the patient develops diarrhea immediately or within 24 to 48 hours of the intake of a food, an alleged food, then we have to consider that it may be due to a preformed toxin, and the toxin has already been formed in the food, and that toxin is inducing the diarrhea. But if the incubation period is more than 24 to 72 hours, then it is an infective diarrhea because the bacteria has to enter the body, go through the incubation period, and then leads to the diarrhea. So again, the periodicity is very important. When did it onset? After the intake of an alleged food. So that also gives you an idea about whether it's a preformed toxin or it's an infective diarrhea. Bloody diarrhea can be caused by enteroinvasive pathogens like Campylobacter and destructive organisms like Shigella, enteropathogenic E. coli, and Clostridium difficile. There are so many viruses that can lead to diarrhea. The important one is a rotavirus, especially that is very prominent in children. So nowadays they are giving vaccine for rotavirus. And then there are Norvac viruses and cytomegaloviruses. Parasitic, lot of parasites can cause diarrhea like amoebas, giardiasis, cryptosporidium, and also helminthic infestations like ascaris, ankylostoma, etc. Then there are opportunistic pathogens like Clostridium difficile. Usually, in case of immunocompromised individuals, this can happen. So again, pathogens like Giardia, Legionella, Candida, then Mycobacterium, Cytomegalovirus, all these organisms can cause diarrhea in case of an immunosuppressed patient. You can think about in case of HIV, diarrhea is one of the important manifestations, especially in the later stages once the immunity is compromised. Then there are other causes of diarrhea like tropical sprue, Whipple's disease. So let us look at what are the things that you have to give stress when you take the history of a patient with a diarrhea. So first thing is to identify whether it is a true diarrhea or not. So as we have seen the definition of the diarrhea, so first thing that we have to see is whether the patient fits into the definition of diarrhea. And the duration we have already discussed. Then the frequency, whether it is with blood or without blood. And also other systemic features like fever, vomiting, abdominal pain, fainting, then travel, history of travel, drug use, diet, weight loss, etc. has to be asked. Especially chronic diarrhea can lead to weight loss. Pathologies like inflammatory bowel disease can end up in weight loss. Then history of alcohol intake, then abdominal surgeries, chemotherapy, radiation, immune status of the patient, whether the patient has any comorbidities like diabetes. And in examination, look for the vital signs, especially we have to look for um, pulse, blood pressure, what is the volume status of the patient. Look for dehydration signs like dry skin, dry tongue, tending of the skin, reduced urine output, sunken eyeballs. So look for all these features to identify whether the patient is in a stage of dehydration. And also an abdominal examination and a rectal exam is very important. In abdomen, look for any distension, bowel sounds, then tenderness, if there is any palpable mass. And also you can give the stool for a culture. And in case of chronic diarrhea, look for signs of malnutrition, weight loss, muscle wasting, tetany, oral and skin lesions, peripheral neuropathies, ataxia, edema, etc. And in case of a laboratory investigation, we have to go for a routine lab workup to identify whether the patient has an infective pathology or not. And also stools can be given for its cellularity as well as culture. So if you suspect a bacterial pathology, you can give the stool for a culture. Look for the pus cells in the stools, which will give you an idea of inflammatory process going on. And also you can look for lactoferrin in the stool so that it's released from the leukocytes. It's more sensitive than the WBC counts. So it's 90% sensitive in identifying inflammatory pathologies. So stool for lactoferrin can be given. And if at all the patient doesn't say about any blood in the stool, you can go for an occult blood examination of the stool to identify whether there is blood in the stools. Then you can also order for an ova or parasite, then toxins of Clostridium, then Sudan test for fat, because in case of malabsorption syndromes, there will be a condition called as steatorrhea where there is increased fat in the stool. So again, you can go for a Sudan test for identifying fat in the stool. Occult blood I have already mentioned. Then electrolytes can be examined to differentiate between a secretory and osmotic diarrhea. And also the pH can give you an idea about the carbohydrate malabsorption. And if all these investigations have not given you any clue, then you can go for a sigmoidoscopy or a colonoscopy where you can go for examining the lumen directly. So that is regarding the assessment of a patient with diarrhea. So the approach to the patient, then the examination factors that we have to take care of, and the investigatory part. So that is about diarrhea.